Hi, welcome everyone. Welcome to our new video series. This is Carlos Onate from USB. I'm here with Sabrina Sanchez.
Hi.
And this is the first of many educational videos. We want to talk about important topics and bring as much knowledge as possible from our experience here at USB. So the topic of today is SAT, ACT, standardized testing, knowing that 80% or close to 80% of universities say tests are optionals. We ask the question, should you take the test? Yeah, so that's the topic today, and let's get on it, okay? First off, what is the SAT and what is the ACT, right?
Well, they're both standardized tests, but they have their differences. The ACT has a science component that the SAT doesn't. It's also a more fast-paced test than the SAT. The SAT is a little bit slower.
I agree.
But they both have an optional essay section of the exam, and they both have an English and a math section.
Correct. So these are standardized tests that, traditionally are used as college entrance, or college admissions. Testing, it's a requirement for most universities, and they have a lot of similarities. Both are equally considered by schools. You can take either or both, and as you said, there are very, very similar things like the math component and the English part, which is writing and reading. Science being the different maker probably for both tests. ACT has a science component that SAT doesn't have, and that is why for many international students, the SAT might be a better option, not for everyone, but for many. If English is something that you struggle with, doing the SAT balances things out a little bit because you have half English content, half math content. If you go to the SAT, all the science is like an additional English test with all the knowledge, the science knowledge, which makes it even harder. But that's the test. Tests are long, are hard. You need to prepare a lot.
Yeah.
We're going to share a bunch of information on test prep as well. And the scores vary. SAT goes from 0 to 1600. ACT goes from 0 to 36, being 1600 or 36 what they call a perfect score. But it's not an easy endeavor. It's a huge commitment once you decide to make one of these tests. Most people take it at least twice, so it's not only once. You need to prepare and do it twice. It's a lot of hours, a lot of months of preparation. And now knowing that it's optional, you might submit it or not. What is the motivation? So before we get into that, there are a couple of things I think we should clarify. So there are three things. One is test optional. What does test optional means?
So test optional means that you have the option to submit your SAT or ACT scores. Even if you don't take the exam, you can still apply for that university.
Okay. But then there is test flexible. What is that?
Test flexible is that you're allowed to use other forms of standardized tests instead of the SAT or ACT, you can submit other standardized tests to be admitted into the university.
Test Act flexible universities will take the SAT, will take the ACT, will take other tests, okay, like the international bachelor or something like that.
Yeah.
And there is one third thing that we hear is test blind. And what is that?
Test blind means that even if you do submit your SAT or ACT scores, the college or university will not look at them.
So school that is a test blind admission school will not take into consideration your test, even if it is a perfect score. They don't care about the test. Okay. So what happened? I mean, suddenly, everyone was taking the test. It was a common requirement. Everybody understood that, and suddenly it became optional.
Yeah.
What happened there?
Basically, College Board and students and colleges were realizing that the SAT or ACT wasn't perfect. So they've been working on fixing it and making it better. But in the meantime, a lot of colleges have made it test optional so that the students don't feel overwhelmed, they don't feel stressed, and being forced to take the exam. And it's also a little bit of COVID as well. COVID also brought on a lot of stress, and they didn't want the SAT or ACT to add on to that stress, making it even harder to get into these colleges and universities for some students.
Right. As you mentioned, there was a lot of pressure and a lot of studies and a lot of people trying to, let's look at admissions, in a different way. How can we work with these students without the testing component, with such an importance? And then suddenly we got hit by the pandemic, and taking the test was difficult. It wasn't safe, and so schools said, you know what, we're gonna make it optional so that more people can apply. Many universities did that, and that's why it's a huge trend, and that's why we're now at 80%. COVID was probably the trigger that made most universities make the same decision, but it's a long thing coming. It's not just because of COVID.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's dive in what we have set as our 3 reasons. The 3 reasons why you should take a standardized test. Okay.
Yep.
So reason number 1.
That you can stand out from competition. So some colleges and universities have over 75,000 applicants, and in order to stand out from these other applicants, now especially since the SAT and ACT is test optional, not a lot of students are taking it, not as many as were taking it before. So now that it's test optional, if you do take the SAT or ACT, you will stand out from all these other students because you put in the effort, you put in the work, and you might have even gotten a really good score on the SAT or ACT. Another reason is that colleges will be able to see a more well-rounded version of yourself. So even if you're an athlete or if you're just academics, they'll be able to see a different side of you that isn't shown through school or through your sports or how you play in the games, anything like that.
Okay, so if you want to stand out, and you do, because we're talking about thousands and thousands of applicants to every university, and you select, a small number of schools, you apply, you want to stand out from the rest. Standardized testing can be one way to stand out. But if you're an international student, and if you're a student athlete, we believe this will definitely help you standing out. Why for student athlete? And we're going to discuss this a little bit later with our guest today, but if a college coach is considering several students with a very similar athletic profile, your academic package can make a difference. And bringing a high test score will help you that way. And for international students, well, it's crucial. Standardized testing is crucial because schools, universities will have a hard time assessing your academic level and comparing you with local U.S. students. Now, the standardized test will put everyone in the same playing field and will allow them to understand your academic level and stand out from the rest, especially from other international students. Because remember, many times you're compared with your own section, your own category. So if most international students will be compared with other internationals. So if you stand out from that smaller pool, you have a higher chance. Knowing that the test is optional, fewer kids are taking the test. So every time you do the test and you do well, you're in a separate level.
Yeah, correct.
Right? So reason number 1, it will help you stand out from the competition. Right? Okay. So reason number 2.
So reason number 2 is for scholarship purposes. A lot of students are able to get more or extra scholarships based off of their SAT or ACT scores. It's not only the colleges that give out these scholarships, but it's also the states themselves that give out scholarships. So some of these states require, and some of these companies require you to take the SAT or ACT in order to get a scholarship from them. So even though the college might be test optional, the company or state or organization that is giving out the scholarship might not be test optional.
Right.
So it always helps out to take the SAT or ACT in terms of that. And also, even if it is test optional, you still might be able to get scholarships from the university itself, because it'll, at the same way it'll make you stand out in applying, it'll make you stand out for scholarships as well.
Right.
And
they will reward you for that. So scholarships is huge. I mean, everyone needs and wants a scholarship, and scoring big in the SAT or ACT will translate in money for you and your family to pay for college. Some universities will reward you with a high score, regardless of their test optional admissions process. But remember, not all the scholarships come from universities, as Sabrina said. Private organizations, public organizations, grant programs might require the SAT or the ACT in order to be eligible for those awards. And in some cases, it's just a requirement. In some cases, it's not that you need a high score to earn the scholarship. In some cases, it's just about to fill this application, you need to submit your score. So it's not only about getting the high score. In terms of scholarships, scoring big may result in thousands of dollars, but just doing the test will help you qualifying for some scholarship programs. So if you don't do it, you might leave a lot of money on the table that you definitely want to pay for college.
Yeah.
Okay. So reason number 1, help you standing out. Reason number 2, scholarships. Reason number 3.
That this trend could be reversed.
And
so
what does it mean? Reverse?
Basically, what that means is that a lot of these institutions and colleges didn't make their colleges test optional permanently. So there's still the option that they can be reversed and it can go back to being a mandatory requirement of the university. And basically the College Board has been working on correcting some of these mistakes and errors that people have found in the SAT. They want to make it digital and shorten it as well. And these changes could allow for the colleges to start making the SAT or ACT mandatory again.
Right. So College Board is working hard on the SAT. The ACT people are working on the test as well. They want to make it more relevant, more effective, more comprehensive. Make it relevant again so that colleges take it into account more, or maybe even mandatory. But there is even legislation now being proposed to make public schools require the SAT or ACT testing for their admissions. So this could be reversed gradually, partially. Some states might have different regulations than others, but you need to be prepared. We don't know what's going to happen. COVID changed many things, but that was a temporary thing. So we need to be prepared. You need to be prepared to take the test if necessary. So I think we have our 3 reasons. This is our recommendation from our staff. We think you should take it because it will help you stand out. You will qualify for a lot of money in scholarships, and you need to be prepared because this trend could be reversed. But we want to see some examples. We want to talk also about our experience with our students. So we're going to have a special guest today joining us, Oscar, from the office. He's going to be right here in a second. Okay, that's it. So here we are with Oscar. Oscar is our lead advisor here at the office. He has the most experience with our student athletes, students in general.
Correct.
And I want him to join the conversation to talk a little bit about his experience with both, test optional application and what happened when kids submit their scores or not. So what can you tell us a little bit about this topic?
This new trend of test optional. Yeah. So the main thing is when we were talking about this conversation in the past is that students need to realize whether or not they need to go this route. And the best way to do this is surprisingly by knowing whether or not they're good test takers. Because the main issue or the reason why you should go the test optional route is if you consider you're not a good test taker. And not for any type of test, but specifically for the SAT and the ACT. And the best way to do this, still recommended that you do take the SAT or the ACT. But it's a trend that has been going on for the past couple of years. There has been schools that have been test optional in the past, but it definitely was accelerated with COVID, where students couldn't even, they will sign up for the SAT and
they were suspended.
They will be suspended, so they couldn't do anything.
So in the beginning, we always tell our students, if you're deciding between SAT and ACT, take both.
Correct.
Right? To see which one.
So we always recommend as a policy, go ahead.
Right, but what you're saying is, even beyond that, to decide if you're going to do the test or not, do the test first.
Yeah, how are you going to know if you're going to do well or not? Because the main thing about the SAT, and people sometimes are assuming things about these exams, is that even if you come from a USA education, and for internationals obviously they don't come from this type of education, you're never taking a test like this. Until you go and you are pressured into the environment of what the SAT or the ACT asks you, you're not gonna know, because there's a lot of students that they do the practice exams, but it's not the same. So you have to go through the process of taking the SAT or the ACT, or hopefully both, to see which one you do better. One of the other, which obviously I don't know if it's exactly the topic, but that a lot of people assume that they just go one route of the exams.
Yeah, I'm gonna take this one.
They just say, hey, let's take the SAT because a lot of my friends are taking the SAT, or because of the prep that I'm finding is more towards the SAT. But you'll be surprised. Some people are more your way of understanding questions, or your way of understanding these type of diagnostic exams. They are better prepared for the ACT, and they are going for the SAT route, where the ACT may be better for them. And I think in 8 years, there's a couple only students that we have recommended that they do that. We have recommended to all of them, but just a couple that have followed what we said.
Of taking both.
And they'll be surprisingly, they have done much better when they take the SAT versus the ACT, or the ACT versus the SAT. Like we just had an example of a kid that he was preparing for so long for the SAT, and we started doing let's do some diagnostics to see, because he couldn't sign up for the SAT. Not because he was freaking out because he couldn't take the SAT in December when he was expecting to do it. And we say, hey, let's just do some diagnostics. Perhaps the ACT may be an option. He does the diagnostic, he does very well. So we say, hey, let's take the ACT. And he actually comes back with a 34 on the ACT.
Wow, almost perfect.
Which is pretty close to a perfect. He's already talking to high-level institutions due to that.
Right, and he didn't expect that.
He wasn't expecting that,
because
his whole preparation was towards the SAT, because that is what is taking the most outside of the U.S. So it's interesting in that aspect that people sometimes they just go that route of one exam because of friends or because of preparation, and they don't look at themselves as a specific person, and that everybody's different. So they gotta figure out which exam is better for them, and that's why we always recommend take the SAT and the ACT once to see how you do, and then you choose the route of the school, the exam that you gotta take.
Okay, good, Oscar. So now TestOptional. This is not a new term, not a new concept, not a new trend. It's definitely accelerated a lot this year, or the last year. But we have been hearing about TestOptional universities for a long time. So tell us about your experience with students here at USB going the TestOptional route. So
it's always been about what are the best chances. Like if a student is aiming for a high-level school, and when he took the SAT or the ACT, he did not do well, we couldn't present that to the school. So so the only route you can, again, is more of a reaction towards what happens after you don't do well, then you go the TestOptional route. And we have done it in the past. We had a student from Puerto Rico that he was an exceptional student. He was being recruited by a Division II school here in Florida, which is one of the best in the country. And from the coach as a liaison that he helped us with admission, he just told us from the beginning, hey, with his SAT, he's not going to get admitted. So the coach told us that the best route for him would be to apply TestOptional. And this is 2017 or even 2016. So over 4 years ago, before this trend became more, this was always considered a progressive school in that type of sense.
Okay.
So they had that option. Hey, if you apply TestOptional, you will be able to gain admission, and not just gain admission, but also qualify for a scholarship that will gain you the type of aid that you need to compensate for the total cost of the school. And he was able to do that with he had a pretty good GPA. He was about 3.75. His SAT, he never broke 1,000, which is below average for the type of GPA and the type of student that he was showing to be in his classes. He was just not a good test taker.
Right.
Even though he took the SAT a couple times, or I think it was 3 times, he never broke the 1,000.
Good student.
Correct.
He qualified for the school.
Correct.
He had what it takes to be a student there, even for an academic scholarship.
And he received an academic scholarship.
But he could not make the score.
Yeah.
On the test.
And he was able to do that. So he was able to get in, get the scholarship he needed.
And play.
Just play, obviously. But because we had, the coach and admissions acted as a liaison. Now, if he was a regular student that was just going by himself and applying, sometimes you don't know. They're not going to give you a feedback of, they're not going to prepare you in the sense, because there's 70,000 students that are applying to a school. It is competitive. So you just got to know that information, that thankfully we are prepared for that because we had the experience.
Right. Now, what about the other spectrum, the other side of the spectrum?
So it's interesting because there's two options why somebody will gain from taking the SAT. First of all, is one that perhaps did not do well on the GPA. If you don't have a good GPA, you can compensate that with a good SAT. Because at the end of the day, it's sort of a scale that works. And what I mean is not even if it is a 3.0, 3.1, 3.2, because some people come from schools that are very difficult.
Right.
But still, you are looked at the same as a guy that has a 4.0 because it was at an easier school.
Right. And this is something that we encounter a lot, especially with international students, that they go to these super, I don't know, highly selective high schools.
Correct.
With high standards academically, with international programs where they learn several languages in some cases, like German and Portuguese and others.
Yep.
And then their GPA is something like a 3.0 or something.
Barely breaking 3.0.
Which back there was the highest. I mean, he can be number one at his class, but the school is so hard that that's the type of GPA they get. When the schools here, when the universities here get the information, they don't know how to assess that. I mean, they don't know that specific high school in Guatemala or Costa Rica or whatever is so hard to go through.
Yeah, they go through it. Unfortunately, they go through a black and white assessment of the school.
They just see that 3.0.
Correct. They just look at schooling in Guatemala and Costa Rica and Europe. If he has this GPA from the school or these grades from the school, it will equate to these grades from the U.S. Unfortunately, it's a black and white, and that's why the SAT and the ACT becomes a level playing field. So you may have a disadvantage in a sense because your GPA is translating lower, but now let's make it out with the SAT and the ACT.
To see who you really are as a student.
And we had that multiple cases of students like that. And there's one case that I always say, which is a student that he scored, he did the SAT once, he did very well, he scored, he did above average. He scored 1290, 1280, I'm sorry. 1290 is the keyword. And when he go through a mission with the coach, they go back to us saying, hey, he qualifies for $15,000 in scholarship, which is a pretty good deal. Academically.
Okay.
Plus what I can offer as a student, as an athlete. But if he scores 10 more points on the SAT, he will qualify for something that they call like presidential scholarship at that school specifically, but that will give him a full tuition scholarship, which it will value at that point at, I think it was $40,000, $42,000
per year.
So only 10 points. That father almost freaked out when he found that out. So the student at that point had to take the exam again to try to get the 10 points.
He decided to take it. Right?
Yeah, he decided because he wanted to make up for that 10 points and try to get the full tuition scholarship, because it was a lot of money. So that's also a key point, that why you always recommend taking the SAT a couple times, or at least up to 3 times. Even the ACT, it is super score. There is a lot of schools now that are also super scoring the ACT.
But think of this: it's not only about those specific milestones. In this case, the 1290 was it?
1290 was
the
what
1290 was a huge motivation for you as a student and as a family to get that scholarship. Imagine all the money you will save just because only by doing the test a little bit better. But as a candidate, you become so much attractive for a college coach.
Yep.
With that full academic package, with that specific score, because now the school is going to pay for your education. The college coach will save from his budget, from his scholarship budget, to award to other players. So you become an asset for any coach that has you. So it's not only about the money you save, it's also about the full package when you present yourself to the schools. Why would explain to me, why would a coach
So I guess it comes down to money. If you're not in a fully funded program, such as a Division I, top tier Division I tennis, soccer, or football, or basketball, it's likely that the coaches are playing with percentage. So if you're requiring a set amount of money, if that money necessarily doesn't come from the sport, the coach may value you a bit higher than perhaps another player that is not good academically, and that means that he needs to give more, even if you both have the same budget, that you need to pay X amount, both of you. But if you are bringing to the table that academic scholarship, that doesn't mean that the coach needs to take that from tennis. You become more valuable. It's pretty simple. Like, you are costing the coach 10x versus another person that's costing the coach
Yeah.
20,000 or 30,000. It's just a matter of numbers, and at some points you become very similar to a lot of players, so that may make a big difference. That's the truth.
Yeah, there are other aspects, also coaches will look at, how good a student you are.
Yeah.
They want to see people who are responsible. There's a correlation between, not only having a good score, but making the effort of doing the test shows, that you want it. Enough to make the effort to take it again. You're a good student. You're a good overall
Correct. candidate
for the program. So many coaches would like that, and many coaches will ask you, from the start. What's the same way they ask you about the, athletic level,
your level, your
stroke
budget,
average, or UTR, whatever it is. They will ask you immediately. Okay, what's his SAT? What's his ACT? That's a huge measurement for them to.
Because sometimes they're always thinking about money. It's like they're always thinking, hey, if this kid has this SAT or this GPA, I can figure out a way to make it within budget, and he's somebody that I can pursue. But if you are not ready at that point of conversation, that's a good point. Like, if the coach is thinking already of, hey, I'm at that point as a coach that I need to make decisions, and you don't have the SAT, and he needs the SAT, or for you may need that SAT, perhaps you go lower on the list, because all the candidates that he's considering already have the exam.
If they're providing the test scores, he will consider those first.
Correct.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Oscar. We're going to wrap it up and continue the conversation. Okay, so to wrap it up, question is for me, what's there to lose? Why not take the test?
Honestly, there's not much to lose. If you take the test and you do really well, it can be a big deciding factor on whether you get a scholarship, you go to college, get into your dream university. And if you don't do well, you just cannot submit it, because most of the colleges nowadays are test optional anyway. So you don't do well, and then that's it. I mean,
right. You got a lot to gain, and if you don't get the score you need, or to put you in the position to get admitted, you exercise your right to not to submit the scores.
Exactly.
One more thing. I mean, the test scores are not everything in the application process, but they provide also important information beyond assessing that specific achievement. Some studies say that your test scores predict a lot what's going to happen when you get to college. Your success in college, especially the first year, is a great way to measure how prepared are you for that initial year. Since first 2 years are so similar in most universities and most programs, these test scores can actually predict very well your success. Not everyone goes into that box, but it helps. So it will give you some confidence if you do well in the test to know that you're going to have an easier path.
Yeah, and even now with the exams being test optional, I mean, college for the most part is kind of not that it's optional, but everything is your responsibility. So I feel that the fact that the SAT or ACT is test optional now, it's giving you the responsibility to choose whether or not you want to take it. And deciding to take it, I feel like is also a big deciding factor on whether you're going to be that responsible person in college as well, and go to your classes.
It puts you in that mentality, that mindset already.
Yeah, exactly.
Of taking charge. I like that. Okay. Well, think about it, discuss it with your family, talk it over with your counselors and the people that you trust, and figure out, make your decision. But make sure that you do everything in your power to get admitted, to get recruited, to get the most scholarship money possible. Don't leave anything on the table. Make sure you go for it. That's our advice from the USP team. We're going to be sharing some test prep tips and insights from our partner, Dr. Jennifer Winward at Winward Academy. We're going to share the links of those videos, which are very, very good. I recommend both for SAT and ACT. And what else? Well, go to our website, universitysports.com, to find out more about USP and what we can do and how can we help you with your college admissions, college application, college selection, college recruiting.
Correct.
As an athlete, especially if you're a golfer or a tennis player, both local students, national US students, or international students. And visit our Instagram account at University Sports.
Yes.
And we also have
our TikTok at University Sports Program.
Right, which is new, and we're We're going to pump a little bit. Thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're going to be adding more and more content starting this year. And if you subscribe, I think you're going to get and learn a lot about college education and the college system in the U.S. Thank you, Oscar. Thank you, Sabrina.
How you do it with a subscribe?
Yeah.
Thank you.